All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the pod, the Player to Coach pod. This is episode 6, and we have a very special guest, Coach Eddie Alexander of Bushnell University, otherwise known as Jordan's dad, otherwise known as Big E. And had a fun conversation with him today. Dove into a lot of different things, how he got into coaching, kind of his AU program that he ran, and now his experience as a parent of a coach, and then now he's head coach of a program. That was good. How was that interview for you? Because you got to kind of be a part of an interview of your dad, which you probably know, 98% of the information that we talked about.
Yeah,
But how was that for you?
no, that's true. I knew quite a bit of what we talked about just because obviously I grew up around a lot of what he talked about and helped with some of it and coach for him now, played for him for a long time. Um, no, it's fun though because we don't always like every once in a while we'll talk about our relationship and how it has been and why it's unique and stuff. But to actually like sit here and talk about it with you was really cool for me as his son. And so my dad's a super passionate person. Um, and passionate coach, and was a big time passionate athlete growing up as a kid. So I feel like we kind of got to see some of that come out in him today, and so that was fun.
For sure. Yeah. And you mentioned this later on in the pod, but you are probably in such a small percentage of college basketball players who got to play with their dad being on the coaching staff. There's probably some cases of that, but probably very, very small.
Yeah,
And
the only one off the top of my head that I can think of is Doug McDermott when he
right,
played at Creighton. But I doubt Doug lived at home, unlike when I
right,
was living at home.
right.
So
And even like there's, those situations where, the head coach and they get their son the like 17th spot on the team, but different situation
right.
obviously, but yeah, it's pretty special. Get some great stories out of him. He was there when both Jordan and I were there. He was there the 2 years that I was there as an assistant, and yeah, I mean he's got some great stories in there, and it's just flat out just a good coach on top of everything. So yeah, enjoy the podcast, and yeah, let's get it going. All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Player to Coach pod. We have a very special guest today, someone who Jordan and I are very close to, one of us way closer to than the other. We have Eddie Alexander, head coach of Bushnell University. He's been there for 5 years. And yeah, what's going on, Eddie? How you doing?
Good, Josh. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. How are you, Jordan?
I'm good. I'm really excited about our episode today. I talk to my dad every single day and see him just about every day. So I'm excited to hear more about all the same things that I know about him.
Don't worry, I got some dirt for you.
Okay,
Ooh,
okay.
okay. This is a great position for me to be in because I get to hear the dirt from both sides, and no shrapnel is going to be thrown my way. So I'm happy about that. Um, all
I
right.
don't know, Josh. Your last year, I mean, I got some stuff.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. All right. Let's just dive right into it. Let's get into kind of the sports that you played growing up, kind of how you got into them, and then kind of lead that into like what your first coaching experience was.
Well, earliest remembrances was when I was 4 years old and moved to California and lived in Napa Valley. And growing up down in Napa, weather obviously was usually really good. So a lot of outdoor sports. Played, baseball, t-ball, soccer, basketball. I mean, I played everything as most as a kid. Um, I was on all-star soccer teams. I was on all-star baseball teams. Um, Never made an all-star basketball team, which is kind of ironic because that's what I coach now. Um, but yeah, I mean, I loved baseball was my favorite sport. Always kind of did soccer to stay in shape growing up, but baseball being my favorite sport, I played catcher and third base growing up. Also pitched some. when I was a kid. But as I got older and got into high school, I was primarily a catcher, and continued to play soccer also. Um, and I played basketball my freshman year in high school. Um, let's see, I quit playing basketball after my freshman year. I was probably the 7 or 8 man on the freshman team. It would be from game to game, right? Like if I was hitting shots, I stayed in. If I wasn't hitting shots, I didn't play much. This body didn't take me very fast up and down the court, so it was never really quick or fleet of foot. So, and I think I was somewhere around, 5'3" or 5'4" my freshman year in high school. So I wasn't tall by any means either. Still aren't. So, yeah, so I took basketball off after my freshman year just to focus on getting ready for baseball. So I would play soccer in the fall season, winter season, go in and just work out for baseball, and in spring play baseball. So that was kind of my MO for sophomore and junior year. And yeah, it was pretty successful. By the time my senior year rolled around, our soccer team made the playoffs for the first time in school history. Our baseball team playoffs for the first time in decades. I had been recruited also to the football team to be the place kicker off the soccer team, so I did double duty and go to soccer practice and then stay for another 30 minutes over to the football field with the football team and kick field goals or kickoffs or whatever. Get done with practice, go in the locker room, change my clothes, and one of the assistant coaches would drive me over to the football game. We played at Autzen Stadium a few times, so I remember doing that my senior year. So had a little bit of notoriety my senior year, being a dual sport athlete at the same time. I remember every time I went to kick off the football, the crowd would chant Eddie, Eddie, Eddie. So it was kind of funny. So that was kind of like a highlight, right, of a sports type thing of you got your 15 minutes of fame. Baseball was my sport. It was my passion. It was my love. I was a catcher. I had a fairly good senior season. I went through a slump, though, my senior year that really dropped my batting average significantly. And so I went from hitting, high 300s to just above 300, like in a matter of weeks, and or less than that. And that really hurt my recruiting, just getting in a baseball slump like that during your senior year when you're supposed to be crushing the ball. So that was hard. Played on summer all-star teams, and that summer after my senior year in high school, had a really great opportunity. I was on a American Legion team. Coaches really liked me. I had some opportunities for recruiting, and just made some poor decisions basically, and kind of gave up my baseball career over the course of a 5-day period of making a decision to walk away from the game, which was hindsight being 2020, obviously was the wrong decision, but it worked out. I believe that God works all things out for better and for good, and because of that, it led me to go into school where I went to and meeting my wife and being connected with you guys, because that never would have happened had I made a different decision. So obviously, I'm pretty happy with my life and have no regrets. But that was my career. I mean, I played summer league basketball going into my senior year in high school on the varsity team, and I was probably going to make the team. I shot really well. I was a good shooter. I just wasn't tall, wasn't fast or anything, but I always had a mind for the game, and that I think was one of those things to where maybe I could have been successful if I'd stayed with it. But my passion and love for the game of baseball just kind of overtook that. So I always coached basketball, even through high school. I coached my younger brother's basketball team. My dad would sign up as the head coach, and then I would basically be the assistant and get to coach the majority of it most of the time. And got into keeping statistics for his team. And we're talking, my brother is 6.5 years younger than me, so he graduated 6 years after I did. And so, my junior year, he's in 5th grade, and I'm keeping stats, right? And we're running the table and winning games, and then he gets, I got the chicken pox or something like that for the playoffs, and we lose. So it was kind of stunk because my brother, even as a little kid, was averaging, 15 to 20 points a game. And so that was just like, yeah, knocked us out of the playoffs. That was my first experience as a coach, right? Getting sick, losing my best player. But yeah, so then I went into college and I coached a club team, played on a city league team, coached a flag football team for the school, a club team. So I got a lot of coaching experience really at a young age in different sports. And then got married young when I was 19 years old, and we had Jordan when I was 21, I think. So 21 years old. So it was parenthood early, and I couldn't wait to get him into basketball. And I remember when him as a kindergartner, trying to get him into the first grade team. They wouldn't let him play, even though he was better than most of the first graders. So I was trying to get him to start playing early, a year earlier than he should have been. But that didn't work out. So anyway, then when he started playing basketball in first grade, I was coaching the teams and stuff, and coached him all the way through high school, basically through AAU ball and stuff, but never coached him on the high school team. Just was always the summer AAU coach. So that was my experience kind of during that. And then, I was an assistant coach at Bushnell for a couple of years, and then got named the head coach after the head coach stepped down. And that's where I'm at, basically. I coached for probably 30 years now of the game of basketball in one way or another.
Well, I knew most of that, if not all of it. But it's kind of cool to see like the transition. Obviously, basketball isn't your main sport, so can you explain a little bit why and how? Because I don't really remember, because I was a kid, so I don't really know like why or how you started dribble drive in 2003. So can you kind of explain that transition and starting that? Obviously, I started playing basketball at an early age, but as long as I can remember, dribble drive was kind of around. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you were 7 years old, right? Summer of 2003. And there was nothing outside of just your local kids sports team and maybe a YMCA. And that was basically it. And your season was 7 or 8 games, and we played YMCA at the same time also. So maybe we get a double dip on a league, and we play 15 games or something, and that was it. And that was your year in basketball, right? And you have to wait basically 10 more months to pick up the ball again. And not that you didn't play other sports, because you did, but basketball was obviously something that you were passionate about as a young age, and you loved it. I mean, you walk around the house playing with basketball or swinging the golf club. Basically, it was one of those two things. But I mean, it's not like you didn't like the other sports, but that was obviously something that you loved, and obviously something that I did as a coach, coaching quite a bit. So, so started looking and trying to find ways to get you opportunities to play more. At that time, there was a gentleman that was starting some tournaments, and he was trying to get like maybe some second grade teams in to play, and so we basically put a team together soon after that. But that summer we ran a basketball camp in 2003. Luke Jackson, who was playing for the Oregon Ducks at the time, came in, was a special guest, and signed autographs, and you guys got your pictures taken with him, and which is ironic, right? Which we'll get to that. And then we started some teams, and basically just put together a team. And you were playing with a bunch of third graders as a second grader, and we went and won this tournament, first time, and kind of got the bug, right? I mean, had some success, and we're like, okay, now we're getting a little hungry and trying to find things. So year after year after year, it started to grow to where our club team had 8 teams going. We had 58 players or something like that in the club. And we grew to 8 teams. We had 6 boys teams and 2 girls teams, and we had a board of directors and as a nonprofit, and it grew and grew and grew. We actually gave scholarships away to some graduating seniors. We did some big things, I felt like, for us in the community. And yeah, that's kind of how it started, just out of need more than anything, the opportunity to provide opportunity for those who wanted to play the game more often than just their 7 or 8 game season for a couple of weeks.
I do remember that. I kind of forgot you. Dribble Drive was able to do a scholarship for a North Eugene graduate, actually,
Mm-hmm.
Josh's alma mater in 2007. He was I think that year they won the state championship, and then he got a scholarship from Dribble Drive. So, yeah,
We also
I
gave
forgot
one.
about that.
You gave one to a girl also who graduated from Sheldon High School.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool.
Very cool. Also, Dribble Drive provided me my very first coaching job, which is cool. Got a chance to, really just kind of sit at the bench and watch Coach Eddie go to work, but it was a good experience for me and my very first official opportunity, other than the little camps you would do kind of on the side or in between seasons as a high schooler. But yeah, so kind of on that topic of Dribble Drive, and we're going to get into your coaching at the collegiate level, your experience there in a little bit. But before we dive into that, I have a few questions about the AAU circuit, kind of what you experienced then at that time. It is, kind of what you were talking about, just about no real opportunities to play. I grew up in the same area as you guys, and same exact type of thing where it's like I only play on the local school team or YMCA teams nearby, and that was just kind of it. And I was kind of always hungry for more, and there just wasn't really that option. And I feel like I really missed out on an opportunity to travel, all up and down the West Coast to really see what was out there. Because, there's times where I thought that I was really good. And obviously, anytime you travel outside your state, you realize there's way more kids out there than you could ever realize. So if you could just talk a little bit about early on what you saw as a benefit of traveling, playing the AU circuit, going those types of routes for Jordan and for the other kids on the team, and kind of the benefits that came out of that.
Yeah, some of the biggest ones were just the experience and the knowledge that people gained. You go to, Eugene Springfield area has 200,000 people, somewhere in that neighborhood, and we were probably, and people, maybe somebody's listening to this podcast that disagrees with me, but I doubt it. We were pretty much the best team in town, and there was another team that came out of what we were doing that was really competitive, and they probably argue with us, that became one of the better AAU teams in the area also. But yeah, when you start beating all the local teams, and then you go and play in your YMCA league, and which is basically all there really was to do, and your team's beating the opponent by 30 or 40 points, it's not helping anybody. It's not helping our kids get better, and it's not helping the other team. It's basically just demoralizing kids when the opposition is so much better, right? Now, two things you can take away from that always. Okay, we got to go get better. And from our perspective, it was like, okay, we got to go find better teams to play. Otherwise, we're just going to beat everybody else up, inflate the egos of these kids, and that's not really what we're trying to do. We're trying to help them improve in their skill sets. And so we really kind of dove into the AAU circuit at that moment, and started finding places to go. Traveled into Washington a lot, traveled into California, Nevada, and I think we went to Idaho a few times, but primarily we just stayed along the West Coast. And I would say during Jordan's high school years, we kind of had grown into probably one of the top 5 AAU teams in the Northwest, with a team that was primarily made up of all the same kids going to the same high school, which was kind of unheard of, because all the teams that we were competing against for championships at the tournaments were teams that were put together of the best players from all over town. And when people found out that we were all going to go to the same high school, all of our kids basically, they were just like, oh man, that's going to be an amazing high school team. And so that experience really helped formulate the identity of these young men, and just the confidence level, not identity of that they were basketball players, but their own confidence and self-esteem. And it really helped educate the parents too. I think sometimes parents get overinflated egos about how good their kids are, just because they're a decent kid in town. They don't realize that there's somebody 100 miles up the road that's twice as good as their own player, or teams that are out there. Um, one of the wins that kind of sticks out in my mind is we played a team that represented Team USA internationally in a tournament down in Nevada, and honestly, our tallest player at the time I think was 6'4", and
Maybe.
maybe, and we're playing a team 6'7", 6'8", and international experience, and we ran this team, and it was a competitive game, but we ended up winning I think like 12 or 15 points. I think, I'm not sure, and that was like really huge. I mean, our guys gained a lot of confidence playing some high level competition. That really paid off, and I think it was great for the parents and parents in our club program got to experience things outside of just the local area, and it really gave people a better perspective that, okay, my kid's maybe not going to get a college scholarship, but they can sure gain some confidence and have a great experience. And the travel was a great experience. The bonding of the kids, they developed friendships, and relationships, and a closeness that you don't get to have. It's the same thing that when you guys were in college, right? That college team, you're traveling together, you're playing together, you're living together. This was kind of a microscopic opportunity of that for these guys with AAU ball, and especially since it was the same group, primarily the same core guys, 5, 6, 7 guys. We'd always have a team around 8 or 9, but the same 5 through 7 guys were on the same team for 6 years plus together. So that built a lot of camaraderie and great experience for the guys, and I think developed a lot of character and a lot of confidence.
Yeah, for sure. Can you kind of talk about, I know you have your opinions on this. So what's your, because you've seen both high school and AAU, you've recruited at both high schools and AAU tournaments. Can you talk about what you think is more important for a player trying to get recruited, what the pros and cons are of each, what kids can pull from each experience, and how you view that as a college coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think that traditionally speaking, AAU programs allow their kids to play a little more free. So you get to see what a kid can do more in the open court, what they can do athletically, what they can do one-on-one, what they can do in those types of moments, right? In a high school program, traditionally, it's more restricted. You're there to run what the coach wants you to run. You're there to, um, you know, get the X's and O's perfect the way that the coach wants to execute them. It's more of a slow down game, especially in the state of Oregon, without a shot clock at this time. So, yeah, I mean, the game's different. You go to an AAU game and it's in the 80s. You go to a high school game and it's in the 40s or 50s. And so the pace of the game is different. And you're seeing different things from the same player. Athletically, you get to show a little bit more of your athleticism sometimes in an AAU because it's a little more up and down the court, a little more free. In a high school, it's different. And there's good high school coaches and there's really bad high school coaches, and they're just are. And not to offend anybody, but I tell you what, there's some high school coaches that are just terrible, and they get the job because they work at the school, and not because they're really there developing the skills of the kids. And not saying they don't love the kids, not saying they don't love the program, but outside of coaching high school basketball at a school, they haven't really done anything themselves as a coach to expand their experiences and to become a better coach. And they just think that they can just keep doing their same thing and get a different result. And it keeps a lot of kids in a box. And it doesn't give those kids an opportunity to really grow and expand their own game because the coach is more about running their system than they are about developing the player. The high school programs that are successful do both really well. So, when I'm recruiting, I'm looking at kids, a lot of times they catch my eye in the AAU circuit, and then I watch them in their high school teams and their high school programs and how they operate within that system. because it's important that player's got to be able to be disciplined to do what his coach wants, even if he disagrees. And body language is a really big thing for me. So I'm watching kids' body language. I'm watching their attitude. I'm watching how they talk to referees. I'm watching how they talk to their teammates. And, I expect a lot of those kids in the AAU system to it catches my eye. I see what they can do. Can they shoot the basketball? Are they athletic? Can they take care of the basketball in an up and down game? But in the half court system, a lot of times at their high school level, are they able to be disciplined enough to take care of the basketball and show us the skill sets that is going to help them be successful at the college level?
That's good stuff.
That's good. Okay, so let's get into your college coaching experience. So start off as an assistant at Bushnell. How did that kind of materialize? I know you talked about getting Luke as a guest at your camp. Luke Jackson ended up coaching at Northwest Christian University, which is now Bushnell. Where did that connection come from? Where did the conversation of you helping out on the team come from? How did that all materialize?
Yeah, it's interesting. I won't dig into what I was doing for a profession before, but basically, as a business owner, and we lost our business, and so in 2010, I kind of had to reinvent what I was going to do. We were still running the basketball club, but my wife asked me, "What do you want to do?" Because now's the great time to make a decision if I wanted to do something different. And I go, well, I'd love to coach full time, and because obviously I loved coaching, and so I went back and finished school, basically, right? And so as I was getting my master's degree in coaching, Jordan had been recruited and had signed at Northwest Christian, and he had just finished up his sophomore year at NCU. And I was in California. I was at a class that I was taking in my master's program, and Tubby Smith was one of the guest speakers. So there's like 15 of us in this class. So obviously we got an opportunity to talk one-on-one with Tubby Smith, and I had an opportunity to have a conversation with him. It's kind of weird that he's kind of one of the reasons how I got into coaching at NCU, and I had no idea that he was going to do that for me. But I asked him some questions, because I was trying to get into coaching at the collegiate level. Had been coaching, obviously, club ball for years, and at different levels, young kids all the way up through high school, and had players that, were playing in college, and I was trying to figure out how to be a college coach. And Tubby Smith goes, it's not what you know, but it's who you know that gets you into coaching. And he goes, but it's what you know that keeps you there. So he goes, well, who do you know? So I'm like, well, I know Luke Jackson, right? So Luke had, when he was playing at the University of Oregon, had been a guest speaker at my camp, right? Signed autographs for the kids and stuff. And that was a connection through my younger brother and a friend of his who knew Luke really well, and that's how we got Luke to camp. Well, fast forward, 12 years or whatever, Jordan's now had been recruited. Luke's the head coach at Northwest Christian, and so I called Luke. I walk out of this conversation with Tubby Smith, and within 5 minutes, I call Luke Jackson. I call Luke, and I go, look, Tubby just told me I need to start with my own personal network. Who do I know? I go, I know you, right? Luke had an MBA career, played professionally overseas, and now he's coaching, and he knows a lot of people. So I asked him, who do you know that you can connect me with that would help me possibly break into the coaching game? He goes, and I told him, I said, so can I buy you lunch when I get back into town? He said, sure, absolutely. So within a couple of weeks, we got together for lunch. And at that lunch, amongst being interrupted multiple times by local fan favorites, people who loved Luke, it's hard to have a conversation in public with him around. At this lunch, he asked me if I wanted to join the coaching staff. And I was actually kind of floored and taken back because I didn't expect that one iota. He had already cleared it with the athletic director. And the athletic director is somebody that I knew at the university for, at that time, probably 15 plus years, and had known of my relationship coaching Jordan for years. and with Jordan being in the program, how would that look, right? And Luke is like, Corey already knows what your relationship's like with Jordan. He doesn't see any issue with you joining the coaching staff, so how about you join our coaching staff? And he goes, and I got no money to pay you though. So basically, I just did it as a volunteer assistant coach, and absolutely loved it. I'd go home every weekend, making notes of the things that I would do as a head coach, things I wouldn't do as a head coach, learning a lot of different things. Learned a lot from Luke just with his experience, because he took a lot of his experiences and translated them to the college level from the NBA. And so there's a lot of things that I learned out of that. And even though I was, twice Luke's age, right? So, or not quite, but it felt like it. So just really being a good assistant coach, the best I could do, and building relationships with players. And so when Luke stepped away, after my second year there, after Jordan's senior year, administration called me into the office and asked if I'd be interested in taking over the team, which I was humbled by, because there was other assistant coaches on staff that had, a few more years of experience than me. But they recognized my leadership ability, my leadership skills, and wanted to give me an interim position for a season to see how I did. And we had a good first year. We beat the number one team in the country at the time. That first season went 19-10. So yeah, that audition season got me the full-time, well, not full-time, but it is full-time, head coaching job.
I knew all that. I've been around for all that. Yeah, I was a part of it. But no, I was like really excited about it.
Yeah, I don't know, Jordan. I never got to coach you as the head coach, and as the assistant coach, I don't think I coached you very much. I coached a lot of the other players, but I didn't really coach you. I didn't want to overstep my bounds, because sometimes with the other players, you're curious if they're going to think there's favoritism there. I never wanted to do that, and being a part of the coaching conversations about players. It took a lot of trust from Luke and from the other assistant coaches for me to be sometimes in those conversations, and for them to be ripping apart Jordan's game or to be building him up in his game. I had to stay very neutral on those situations. And sometimes I would just choose not to comment, because I didn't want to be taken as, hey, this is his dad's opinion. I was more concerned about those guys and what they were thinking from my position, although I'd coached Jordan for years, and I had absolutely no problem lighting him up when he was making mistakes, and letting him hear about it, and letting the crowd hear about it, and letting his teammates hear about it. And then his mom would, hey, maybe we were a little hard on Jordan, and I was like, I was not hard on him. You want to see hard on him? Let's get, So, but it was good. I mean, I didn't get an opportunity to really do that too much at the college level. With him, but all the way up through to that opportunity when he went to college and played ball, it developed our relationship for sure. And we always had that coach-son relationship and that father-son relationship, and we kept those two things separate really well. And I give him a lot of credit for that, because it's really hard when your dad's being really, really hard on you, and to be able to walk away from that, knowing that your dad still loves you, and be able to separate those relationships.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there was one, me and Josh were talking about it a little bit earlier today, but I have all these memories, right, of you coaching me and everything. There's a few that stick out, and one of them is, and you probably remember, I think you just referred to it, when we were in Reno. We had like an early morning game. I think we were the first game of the day in this gym, probably 8 or 9 in the morning. And we did end up losing this game, to my memory. But I had a very slow start to the game, and you were not thrilled, come to find out. And you literally called a timeout just to chew me out. And then we were back on the floor. I don't think you said one word to anyone else in the huddle, but it ended up being we had a dad on the team, of one of the players on the team, who made a highlight video, Josh, and my highlight included that clip, and like the background music from the highlight video was cut out, and you could just hear my dad chewing me out, and like grab the jersey, okay, like that, like grab my jersey face to face, chewing me out. Um, and like, but the thing was is that I didn't have a problem being coached like that, um, at all. Like I really didn't. If anything, it motivated me. Um, First, like not just because he's my dad, but I wanted to play better for myself. But then, of course, you don't want to let your dad down, and so um, like a work ethic was definitely instilled in me as a kid by both of my parents, and anything less than my best effort was unacceptable. So, um, he coached me on effort and expectations, and had the bar set really high. So yeah, like that wasn't anything that I had a problem with, and I never did. I actually remember another story too.
Wait just a second. Let me
We
comment on that first story.
Okay, go for it.
I called timeout, and I met you out at the free throw line, if I
Yeah,
remember.
it was close, but
I
we
mean,
made our way towards the sideline.
I beat you onto the court from you coming off the court, and I met you out there, and I remember the kids started, the other players starting to go to the bench. I was like, nah, we're going right here in the middle of the court, and I did. Um, let everybody know, including yourself, that the lack of effort and the laziness with the basketball was completely unacceptable. Um, and if I do remember correctly, you went on to play significantly better the rest of the game, even though we did lose. Um, and I think we won many games after that. Kind of spurred our team on a little bit, and
Yeah, we ended up having a good weekend.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I admit I was probably a little bit too hot and overheated in that moment. Um, but I did not. I never minded if guys missed shots. It was not taking the shot that I minded. It was passing up open looks. It was being lazy with the basketball and making silly turnovers. It was not sprinting back on defense. It was just not the effort. If the effort was there, I was never really overly heated. It's the lack of effort and the laziness that always lit me up. So yeah, so that was the reason for that, not necessarily because I was a jerk.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. No, I do remember though one thing about, just like you kind of mentioned it with our player coach and father son relationship, and how we were able to separate those two things. There was a practice, an AAU practice, I think maybe the summer after my freshman year, summer after my sophomore year in high school, and we were practicing at Sheldon. And we, went home together. Obviously, I lived with you, so um, I think I snapped back at you in practice about something, um, and you like made the whole team run and got on me about it. But then it was kind of funny. I was super caught off guard. You'd never said this to me. We got back in the car after practice on our way home, and you stopped the car actually on the side of the road. And I thought you were like still upset, and you instead told me how proud of me you were that I argued with you. And I was like, what? I, especially after you made us run for it,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't make sense to me. But um, I think at that point, you had told me that you were proud that I kind of had a little bit of a backbone and defended myself a little bit. Because I grew up a quiet kid. And Josh, you could attest to this. Like, I'm a pretty quiet, reserved, shy dude, being one of my buddies. So it's kind of like, yeah, like I won't usually speak up unless I'm usually like heated or actually have a strong opinion on something. And I think at that point you kind of, were proud of that as a dad, but did not appreciate it as a coach. And so I think I got the lesson a little bit. Do you remember that at all?
I do, and I think what I was upset about was obviously the timing of it was very poor, right? It was in the heat of the moment in front of your teammates. You never talk back to a coach in those situations, and you're going to pay a penalty for that, obviously. But then on the other side, as a dad, I was like, it's about time he stood up for himself. And so because you wanted to see that backbone. You wanted to see, like, okay, does this player even care? And so that showed me how much you cared about what we were doing and about those situations. And so, yeah, I could handle that as your dad because, I mean, I'm not perfect. I mean, we're all human and we're all learning. And if it wasn't for God's grace, you know, we'd all be in trouble. So, um, so that I was just proud of the fact that you were learning something and standing up for yourself, even if I didn't agree with you, and even if you picked the wrong moment to do it, it actually showed that, okay, you know, this kid's got a backbone, and I think he's going to be successful because of it.
Yeah,
That's cool.
Yeah.
One thing that was always not surprising, but pleasantly surprising was being a player during Jordan's last 2 years when you were at NCU coaching, and it truthfully not just saying this because you're on our podcast, but there's an overwhelming amount of respect that you held from the locker room because of the obviousness of you not, hey, I think Jordan should get some more minutes here and there, or even the other way around of you being extra hard on it. I think there was a level of respect from everybody. Can you talk to us just like how you went about your role as an assistant? Because the assistant has a very particular set of expectations and a different way about going about his relationship with his players rather than being a head coach. So can you just speak to how different the relationship was as an assistant coach on a college team versus being a head coach on a college team?
Yeah, I mean, as the head coach, you got to make all the tough calls, right? So, but as an assistant coach, you don't have to make those decisions, and what decisions you do make, the head coach gets blamed for. So it's, as an assistant, you're basically answering to your head coach because you're there to help your head coach look good. But my job was to build relationships with the players in a different way. And there was multiple assistant coaches, right? And so every assistant coach did things a little differently. And I was the new guy to the staff my first year. We had Coach Litz, who is a basketball legend, as an assistant coach, who's passed away now. But and then Mark McCann, and Mark was a good assistant coach. He was Luke's right hand man. And so, but my job, I felt like with the players, was a little bit different. My job was to stay a little more even keel, right? Not ride the emotions of the highs and the lows of the games, not ride the emotions of the highs and the lows of how people practiced, but to stay pretty consistent and find things in a player's game that could be fixed, and help build that relationship with them and pull guys aside just periodically and say, hey, why don't you try this? I think coach is looking for this a little bit more, or I think if you do this, you'll be able to take advantage of your defender, or I think if you work on this foot placement, you'll be in a better defensive position. And I didn't want to overstep what Luke and Mark had really established and what Litz's position was with the team. So it was really important to me to kind of feel my way through that. And then my second year, I felt obviously a little more comfortable, but the team was kind of a hot mess that year. And so, it was putting out fires. I mean, my job that year was to put out fires, whether it be keeping AT from quitting the team multiple times, or keeping guys under that were doing things off the court that they shouldn't have been doing, trying to remind them to make good decisions every weekend and do smart things. I mean, that was a rough year, that second year. But my job as an assistant was just trying to put the fires out, and sometimes they're just little fires, right? With a single player having a single issue can really ruin the team chemistry, can destroy a locker room. And so trying to identify those things and to put those things out, so Luke could really focus on the team as a whole and focus on game planning and stuff. That's the approach that I took as an assistant. I think I asked my assistants as a head coach to do a little bit more than what I was asked to do. I wasn't asked to do a whole lot. My role was was to be the mature one in the coaching staff and to basically give some level-headed advice, you know. And now as the head coach, obviously I ask my assistants to do a lot more. I ask my assistants to to actually run parts of our practice and to insert their. Now that I've built up relationships and I've built up the trust with my assistant coaches and they know what I'm looking for, I put it on. Jordan's one of my assistant coaches now, and so I put it on him and Coach Alex to run our defense. And if I see something I don't like, I tell them to fix it. But I basically let them coach 97% of our defense stuff in practice. And so I think that's important to build up their confidence, their experience, because someday they're going to be head coaches. But it also allows me to focus more on a lot of the off-court basketball stuff that needs to get taken care of too. In preparation for practices, I only have to prepare for certain parts of practice, although we do have coaches meetings and I can tell them the direction we want to go. But it's their job to put the steps in place to make sure we get to that direction. And then if I'm not happy with that, it's their job to fix it. So, but as an assistant coach, for me, it was more about the players, because that was my role on that staff. But I think as an assistant coach, your role is going to be different depending on the staff you're on and depending on who your head coach is.
So can you talk about your first year as a head coach? I was a graduate assistant. I had just finished playing. So I had a little bit different of a role as a grad assistant than I might now. But what, in your opinion or your perspective, what were some of the struggles as a first-year college head coach, especially, being with the program, 2 years before taking over? What were some of the early struggles with the team or navigating how to get wins? And obviously you got into the recruiting stuff a little bit late, so you can kind of talk about that. That might have been the first struggle, honestly.
Yeah, the biggest struggle was actually putting a team on the court. I mean, we had 6 guys left, basically. That was it. And I got the job in May. And that's, by that time, it sounds really bad to say this because the guys that I signed when I took over, it makes it sound bad to them. But honestly, all of your top recruits, they're already signed. They've already committed somewhere. They've already got multiple offers, So I'm not going to be able to go out late May and go sign all of my first choice guys, right? So that's how it kind of worked. I mean, there was a couple of guys that I had talked to as an assistant coach, but Luke kind of recruited his teams a little bit differently than I do now, and which is fine. And so, I made a couple of phone calls really right away to a couple of kids that I knew that could be available, and said, I'm the head coach now, and I need a couple of guys that I can count on. I need a couple of guys that I know, that I have some history with, to help hold this program together. Because honestly, it was kind of, we had 6 guys. We had to rebuild something and try to win the next year, and the best we could, because I knew that I was under an audition. I knew that I was going to be, there could be some struggles. And so I think that was the biggest thing, was just trying to find the right guys to work together to somewhat be successful. And we already had a really good core coming back, so it was like trying to figure out the right pieces of role players that would work around those guys. And because at that time, there was no way I was going to be able to get another, top tier starter. So it was basically trying to find role players that could do their role really well. And I commend every single kid I signed. I think we had to sign 10 dudes. And those 10 guys, I mean, they came in hungry and excited with an opportunity to play college basketball. And I think that propelled us around the core group that we had. I mean, I remember our first practice or second practice, and we almost had a huge fist fight between 2 dudes. And it went all the way down into the locker room, and here I am, a week into my head coaching job with practice, not a week into when I started, but a week into the start of the season. And I'm standing between 2 guys, and guys are almost in a fist fight, and then one of the players challenges me, and I'm like, okay, I got a decision to make. What kind of a head coach am I going to be? Right in this very moment, I got to decide: am I going to stand up to this kid, or am I going to, back down and appear soft? Right. So I basically got nose to nose with him, and challenged him. And I said, you think you're tough, but basically I got old man strength, so let's go. And and it didn't go anywhere, thank goodness, praise God, because I might not be sitting here in front of you if it had. But yeah, that was my experience that first year. It was tough, but we won. We did. We won games, and we won games a lot the hard way. We lost some close games we should have won. But like I mentioned, we beat the number one team in the country that year on our home court, that was huge. But even out of that game, we had struggles, and so we had struggles internally with one player specifically, and but you get through those struggles, and it makes you better as a coach, and then we've obviously gone through a couple of years of COVID issues, and those bring different experiences. But that first year taught me a lot. It really told me what really works well, what things I do well, and what things I didn't do very well, and kind of revamping those things to get better as a coach.
Early on, you talked about obviously you're kind of building a program, basically from ground level. I mean, you only got 6 players, and a summer's worth of recruiting, as we know, on the college level, is not enough time. It's a all year round deal. You talked about getting the right players in there. What was your idea of like the type of culture that you wanted to create as a basketball program, and how did you go about finding the right players to fit that culture? That's something that Jordan and I talked about a few episodes back of. It's really more than the talent. Like, there's so much more to building a team than just what you do on the basketball court. So how did you go about finding those right guys for your program?
It's about getting to know the character of the individual, and that takes time and takes a lot of observation. It takes talking to coaches, and quite honestly, I've not found, and this sounds bad maybe, but I've not found a lot of success in talking to a kid's head coach in high school. That's never been helpful to me. I'm not saying that it can't be helpful, but and it doesn't mean I won't talk to a kid's head coach from high school. But that kid's head coach is primarily pumping them up, and I've had kids pumped up to me about how good their character is, and after I sign them, I'm like, this kid's got terrible character. So I've learned to really be skeptical sometimes, and so I trust my intuition quite a bit in regards to the character of an individual, and spending time around that player and observing their parents, observing how they speak to their parents, observing how they interact with players, how they sit on a bench. I've coached for so long that I've learned to read body language in a way that allows me to determine a kid's character quite a bit, to be honest with you. Am I fooled? Am I wrong sometimes? Absolutely. Absolutely I'm wrong. I'm never 100% right, that's for sure. But, one thing that one of my assistant coaches has told me is to always trust my gut, because my gut is what's got me where I'm at. Okay? So trusting my gut as a coach has gotten me to where I'm at. And if I'm happy with where I'm at, which I am, I'm very happy with where I'm at. I love coaching at Bushnell. Then trust my gut. Trust my gut with players. Trust my gut with guys. Trust my gut with reading people. And am I wrong? Yeah, I'm wrong, and I'm fooled sometimes. But for the most part, determining that character is what's building my culture. And I know what kind of culture I want to build. But that takes building a framework of the right kind of players around it. Because eventually they're the ones that are building the culture. They're the ones that are perpetuating it. So I've got to put the right mix of guys around that. And then on top of it, they have to be talented, right? Because you've got to win basketball games. And so it's This has been a long year of recruiting for me. I feel like this recruiting season has gone on and on and on for me. And a lot of that is just because we've been able to, with the transfer portal, which has gone nuts, it's allowed us to filter through so many more guys than we've ever filtered through, probably. So there's been so many guys that have gone onto our recruiting board and guys that have fallen off, and some guys that we actually offered. And by the time they decided not to come, I was really thankful because I'd gotten to know their character and I didn't trust it, right? I didn't trust that they were going to be a good fit. So I was really thankful because I didn't have to like pull the offer. They walked away from it, and I was like, oh, thank goodness, right? Because I hate pulling offers, but I've had to. So yeah, so that's just you really got to get to know guys a little bit in regards to their observations, their conversations, how they talk, what kind of music they listen to. I mean, quite honestly, it sounds really bad. I'm not trying to be judgmental, but garbage in, garbage out. So if they're not going to be a good fit in regards to their actions, their attitudes, the way they treat one another, the way they treat other people, the way they treat the opposite sex, if they're not going to be a good fit, then I don't care how good you are, I can't sign you. And so it's really important that that character and that culture is got to be first and foremost.
Can you briefly talk about the importance of academics when you're recruiting, especially at the NAI level, and how we do scholarships? And what are your standards um, for that when you're recruiting?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I use this kind of as a hard, fast rule. Do I bend this rule? Yes, I do bend this rule because it really depends on the level of talent of the kid and the reason why their GPA is what it is. But basically, a high school kid with a sub 3.5 GPA, I'm not really looking at them too hard. A transfer from a junior college with a sub 3.0 GPA, I'm not really looking at them. If you don't have a 3.0 at a junior college or you don't have a 3.5 in high school, you're lazy, in my opinion. And that's strictly my opinion. Um, where do I bend that rule, right? I'll sign a kid who's below a 3.5 GPA when he's coming out of a private high school because coming out of a private high school, usually the standard of academics is much higher. And so that kid's got to work really hard sometimes to get a 3.2. And so I'll kind of pay attention to that kid a little bit more. Um, Somebody at the junior college level, for every point they're below a 3.0, they better be putting up 10 points more. I mean, if you're a 2.5 kid and you want to transfer to my school, you're not going to get any academic money on top of your athletic money. And if I'm going to spend a lot of athletic money on you, you better be lighting up the scoreboard. You better be a great leader. You better be a great teammate. You better not be all about yourself. You better be really respectful to your head coach. You better look sharp. You better act sharp. You better cross your T's and dot your I's and be the perfect player in every area if you're so lazy you're getting a 2.5 in college at a junior college. And that sounds really harsh, but I coach at a private Christian university, and one of the things that we have is our model athlete, because we care about the spiritual development of the player, the academic development of the player, and the athletic development of the player. And so academically, they got to be getting it done in the classroom. Um, I can't handle having more than one or two guys that I'm taking an academic risk on within the program. Okay. I will take a chance on somebody who's maybe not where they need to be academically if they check all the other boxes, like in regards to their talent, in regards to their character as an individual and stuff like that. I'll take a chance on them. And we do have a couple of those guys in our program right now. And it's stressful as a coach, to be quite honest with you. It's very stressful to have guys that are not successful on their own academically. Um, so academics is really important. I got to know that guys can get it done in the classroom, so I don't have to worry about that on my team. And so that's really important to me. You know.
Um, Something that me personally, me and my coaching journey has been a lot about getting as many different experiences as possible to understand where my best lane or where I best see myself thriving in. Can you give an idea of somebody who may not have had any college experience or know about the college schedule? Can you just give like a percentage of duties that it takes to be a college head coach and kind of what that is, and kind of why it's not, hey, if you know X's and O's, and you'd be a great head coach? Because we've all heard stories and we see examples of it that it's not. It takes a lot of different characteristics and responsibility. So can you give an idea, percentage wise, and just how that's played out for you of different duties as a head coach of a college basketball program?
Oh, wow. I mean, our season basically goes for 6 months, right? From the time we start practice till the time it's over. Um, and then when those 6 months is over, I hope to take maybe a month off collectively over the next 6 months. Not all at once, but a week here or a week there. Um, since our season's ended recently, I haven't stopped working because we're in the middle of recruiting. And when you're recruiting, you're constantly recruiting. You're still recruiting your same players to come back to you. You're recruiting the new players to come to you because nowadays with the ability to transfer, you got to make sure that your existing players are still feeling wanted and taken care of too. And my guys know how much I love them. I mean, I tell them how much I love them. I care about my players, and so I spend a lot of time, talking to guys and meeting with guys, maybe shooting them a quick text message, whatever. So that takes a lot of time, and because we got somewhere between 16 and 19 dudes on the team. And that's a lot of time to connect with every single one of them. And there's different layers of connecting with different guys. Some guys we have to spend a lot more time with. Some guys we don't have to spend as much time with, based on your relationship with them, based on the character of that kid. Maybe they don't require a lot of time, but yet they still want to know that they're cared for, right? And they still want to know that they're wanted. So we do that in different ways. Coaching the game, if all I had to do was coach a game, this team, I mean, coaching college would be simple and everybody would do it, right? That's percentage wise, coaching a game is maybe 5% of the job. Josh, maybe 5% if I'm lucky. But it's the best 5%, in the world, right? So it's all the other stuff that takes so much time. It's preparing for your off season. It's figuring out the scheduling. It's figuring out the calendaring. It's figuring out what off-season programs you want your guys to work on. It's individualizing that for every player. Thank goodness you have assistant coaches to help you out with that. It's reserving the gym. It's scheduling activities. It's meeting with your vendor to order uniforms for next season, which I've already done. Or it's working on every season, off season, I want to take something and improve something in my program. So this season, I've been focusing on our men's team, our locker room, our team room, and so I've been working on upgrading our team room with little things here and there. And I say little things, but it's costing a few $1,000, right? So it's so they're kind of big things because you spend several thousand pretty quickly, but it's things that improve your program. So you're spending time doing that. Spend a lot of time looking at the names on our boards and recruiting and figuring out what things might look like for next year, talking through that, what we're going to need from certain players. So how do we communicate that to certain players? Because, when we play team X, what we're going to need from that guy, and when we play team Y, what we're going to need from that guy. So how do we develop those things within that guy? And so there's a lot of work that goes into it. So the team room, it's going through the uniform storage closet and cleaning things out and making sure that you're set for next year, making sure you're ordering your gear for recruiting gear to hand to recruits. You got to make sure your gear's coming in for the next season for guys. And then you got to start looking at what your travel is going to look like. You got to work on scheduling. I mean, at our level, I'm doing all of our scheduling, and so scheduling all of our off-season, preseason games, and what that's going to look like. And so that takes a lot of time, communicating with coaches and trying to set that up. And when your RPI and your strength of schedule matters if you're in nationals and what your national rankings look like. You got to care about who you're scheduling, and so then you're analyzing other conferences and other teams and other programs and who's returning and are they going to be any good next year, things like that. So all of those things take a lot of time if you want to do a good job. If you don't care about wanting to do a great job and you just want to do the job itself, um, then you can cut a lot of corners. But I don't believe in cutting corners.
Yeah, can you kind of? I know it because I've played it and I played it for you for a while. But can you talk about your brand of basketball, um, and what you try to get at with the team, the standards that you have, and then can you also tell us why that's the brand of basketball that you want to play? Like, I know who you liked watching when you were growing up and getting into coaching, but yeah, like tell us why you want to play the way you do.
I like to play fast. That's what I prefer as a head coach. We've had to slow things down for a couple of years based on our roster, but this year we're going to pick it up and um, we're going to be one of the best in shape teams in conference because we're going to run. So because we're going to run, and the one thing and the reason why I like that, Jordan, is because we got a lot of guys that like to take shots, and the only way to make sure you keep everybody happy is to have enough possessions to get enough shots for enough shots to go around to everybody. But if you're playing too slow, you're only going to have one or two guys that are getting the majority of the shots, and maybe that works for your team. But I don't think it's a real fun way for guys to play basketball. I think guys have a lot of fun playing basketball when it's a little more fast paced. So that's why I like to play that way, is because I think our guys like to play that way. They enjoy it, and if you're enjoying the game, you're going to work harder at it. And if you're going to work harder at it, you're going to be better at it. And if you're going to be better, you're going to win some games. And so I just think bringing joy to the game helps your team be better. And so I like to bring as much joy as I can, and the way we do that is by playing the way that I think our guys really enjoy playing, and that's going to be a little more fast paced. Sharing the basketball, being a great teammate, having some fun, encouraging one another to hit the open shot, and letting them know about it when they do hit it. Obviously I grew up watching the Lakers, Magic, Kareem, James Worthy, Michael Cooper, Byron Scott. Those are some of my favorite players, and watching a 6'9" point guard just run the show was amazing, and right, and so it was showtime, and that's what I grew up watching. It's what I loved, and I was a huge fan of Michael Jordan. Although I was not a Bulls fan, I was a Michael Jordan fan, and I love the Magic and Larry Bird showdowns. I hated the Celtics, and you had to hate the Celtics if you loved the Lakers, and so now who's the best team. Not who wins all their games, but who's the best team in the NBA? I think it's the Golden State Warriors. Why? Because the best team shares the basketball. They have the most fun. They play with that kind of joy. You saw this with Baylor, right? I mean, that was their term that they used, was joy. They wanted to play the game and have joy, and I think that just has to do with your team being committed to enjoying what they're doing, and in that joy that you play with, you get the results from that. It's not about winning games. The winning is a byproduct of doing things the right way, and so we strive to do things the right way. We strive to have some fun. We strive to make sure guys are enjoying themselves, and when they do that and they win games, they play with a lot of joy and happiness, and that hopefully resonates with them in their life.
That's good. Yeah, you take different bits and pieces from every coach that you're around, and the one that I had never seen before that I got to see live in person with you guys was starting off practice by running suicides and just reminding them that we don't get tired here at Dribble Drive, and that was one of those like, oh wow, they don't get tired here because they don't really have an option because they're going to be in shape. So that was. You're definitely on point with your own assessment of your culture and how you guys play. And again, joy only comes when you're in enough shape to have joyful when you play, or have a joyful experience when you play. So that's definitely true. So last week we dove into the conversation of referees our experience being referees, our experience, as players with referees. I'm curious, and definitely experience as coaches with referees and the relationships there. Can you talk about your relationship with referees currently, how you go about mending them, and possibly a story or two? Because I can imagine that you have a few.
So are you
I got a
assuming you
story.
don't
I
have good
got
relationship?
stories if he doesn't mention it. I got
Okay.
stories if he doesn't mention it.
I actually, when I was running our club team, I actually went and coached for a couple, refereed for a couple seasons. Um, I think it's important as a coach to understand what a referee's perspective is. Um, and I think we lose sight of that. There is no referees going to a game and saying, I'm going to screw this game up. No referee has that intention. If they do, then they shouldn't be refereeing. But I don't believe any ref goes into a game assuming they're just going to screw this game up. And maybe they do like this coach and they don't like that coach, and so deep inside they wish this team would win, and they hope this team doesn't win because they don't like that coach. I mean, we're human, so I got to believe that there is some of that out there, but they got to stay neutral, right? It can't become evident, and I feel like as a coach, to me, when it becomes evident, because I have been in those shoes, because there's no referee that can walk up to me and say that you don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm like, I do, because I've been a referee. I refereed high school basketball, not for high school, but in AAU circuits. So I understand, what that is. I understand. I'm a coach on the sideline, so I understand what that is, and I take very seriously when I referee. And so I think that was important for me to have a good perspective. So I don't usually get too upset with referees, except when I know they're wrong, and 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 I feel pretty confident usually when I know they're wrong, because I won't challenge them on things that I'm like, hey, that's a subjective call, and yeah, it didn't go my way, but I'm not going to challenge them on that because they're human. It's based on their perspective on that call. But when I think they make calls that are completely inconsistent or from how they've been calling the game, um, when the call goes our way, I'll usually look at the other coach and kind of give them a wink or a nod and let them know that, hey, I think the referee screwed up. It just benefited me this time. Um, and when it hasn't benefited, and when it goes against us, I let the referee know, sometimes in a nice way, sometimes in a forceful way, that the call they just made was garbage. And I expect them to explain why they made that call, because if they can't explain it to me, then I think it's personal, right? No referee likes to be shown up, so I try not to show up a referee until they've blatantly done things inconsistently for a couple of different times, and when they've done that, usually it'll end in a technical foul. But and there's also times to where I feel like I need to defend my players, and I've purposely gotten technical fouls to let my players know that I got their back. And that's a coaching strategy. I've literally told a referee to give me a technical foul before. He's like, you're going to get a technical foul. And I said, please give it to me. I need it right now because my team needs it. He's like, oh, okay. So he teed me up. So yeah, I've had those moments also. So I feel like I have decent relationships with referees. There's certain referees that I don't like, not because I don't like them as a person, because I just think they're a terrible referee, because they have bad judgment. And I'm not usually wrong, because when we're playing bad teams in conference, those referees are at our games. And, you tend to put the best referees with the best teams in conference. So, there's a reason why they're at a game when our team's not doing very well in conference and we're playing the worst team in conference. That referee means they're probably not being ranked very highly in conference. So they're probably going to make a lot of mistakes today. And I'll tell my coaches, hey, these guys are going to make a lot of mistakes. Ease up, give them some space. Let's not ride them too hard. And, so you got to know the situation. I do try to have good relationships with referees. There's referees that did not like Luke when Luke was the head coach. And I had to spend some time mending those fences a little bit with those referees, helping them know that I wasn't Luke, over the next couple of years, and that maybe I wasn't going to complain about the same things that he complained about, or, and that's okay. I mean, I'm a different coach, right? So I didn't want them holding things against my program, just based on what relationship they had with the previous head coach. So I think relationships with the referees are important. I know most of them by name, by first name, and they know me by first name, and usually they're pretty genuine in seeing how you're doing. And if it's Christmas, I'm wishing them Merry Christmas, and if it's their birthday, I tell them Happy Birthday, right? Because I just, it's important that they know that you are a real person too, and that. But when the ball goes up, I'm the coach and they're a referee, and sometimes we're opposing forces. That's part of the game.
Can you talk about the story when you got ejected when I was a kid? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. I'll never forget
Can
it.
you say what happened and then what you said and then what was the result of that? What
Oh
you were
gosh,
doing
you're
during
just
the
wanting
game?
to throw people under the bus right now, aren't you?
No, you don't have to name drop. There's
Okay.
no naming anyone.
Yeah, you have to name out everybody involved.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I think you were in eighth grade,
Yeah,
ninth
it's like
grade.
middle school or something.
Yeah, I think it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
eighth grade, and referee was a newer referee I had not seen before, and he made some really bad calls, um, and I told him, I said something about it. He kind of warned me, and then I kind of shouted out that this is ridiculous, and he teed me up for saying this is ridiculous, and then ejected me and gave me a double tag and threw me out. Now, mind you, our team was not playing very well, so I
That's
was
true.
upset about that too. I think we had like a 4 or 5 point lead, and we weren't making shots, and we weren't playing very good, and so
Yeah,
I,
this was literally like 5 minutes into the game.
yeah, it was quick. So
Yeah.
I yeah, said a few things and got tossed. So I don't swear, so I wasn't cursing. I just said this is ridiculous, and I got tossed for saying this is ridiculous. I guess I just got on the referee's nerves. So I go downstairs. I'm sitting in another gym watching a game, and then at halftime, one of the parents came and found me and told me that, oh, we're up by 20, and I was like, okay, well, that's good. I think we ended up winning the game by like 40 plus points,
Dad,
and
I think it was literally 60.
a 60. Okay,
Yeah.
Jeez.
okay. So we ended up winning by like 60 points then, I guess. Okay. Um, so I literally had something to say to the tournament director about it, and that referee got fired. He never refereed a game again. So I kind of got justified, I guess, a little bit, and I got tossed from the game, and I got the referee fired. So there you go.
And you won, so.
And we won by 60, and it worked. So I guess getting tossed, it kind of motivated the team. They didn't like the fact that I got tossed either. They were pretty upset about that.
Wow. Do you have any good stories being at Bushnell? I'm sure you do.
Yeah, I could not get a referee's attention one time, and so um, I think it was in the second half of a game. Yeah, it was the second half because we were coming back on offense. The other team scored. I didn't like it. I stepped onto the court. I don't mean like onto the court. I basically walked towards the referee as he's running up the court, and he was like, doing his best to try to ignore me. And I just kept walking at him, and I was yelling at him, and he had no choice but to basically stop the game and give me a technical foul and hear what I had to say because he was just ignoring me. And I wanted to make sure he was not going to ignore me anymore. So I made sure I got in the way of him coming up the court. Yeah, that was one moment. Yeah, I think there's probably been a few moments I've had to be reminded that I had a technical foul before, and I better not get a second one. And but I mean nothing too egregious. I mean I've only had probably in the 4 years that I'm coaching probably only 6 technical fouls at the college level. So it's not like I've had that many, but they've been pretty memorable, the ones that I've had, because if I'm going to get a T, I'm going to make sure I'm getting my money's worth. And I've never been tossed from a game in college, because if that happens, I'm suspended the next game also, and there's no way I'm going to miss a game coaching. So I'm not.
Wow.
I'm never getting 2 techs. If I get 2 texts, it's because a referee was ultra sensitive.
Yeah. We're probably trying to make you out to have a bad rep with refs. That is not the case. I
No,
can vouch for, and that's not a biased opinion, though. I think the one thing, and this was, like a lot of people think you were hard on me as a coach or whatever, or you're like hard on officials. It's because it's really easy for you to get loud. Um, like I can't yell as loud as you. I think I've kind of developed a little bit more of a coaching voice, but it's easy for you to get loud. And so I think loud sometimes is intimidating to people and they perceive that as like being like negative. So,
I have had a referee called me a madman before.
yeah, that was in college.
Yeah,
That was in college. I was on the staff. Yeah.
yeah.
But it's just cuz you're loud. So
Right.
I don't know.
I
But you
mean,
had to be.
the
You're a
referee
catcher.
tells me that he loves my passion, but I'm yelling like a madman on the court, and I'm like, you're not doing your job. Do your job. And so, when I'm coaching AAU, I let referees know. I'd remind referees that I'm like, look, you're the only one here getting paid, except maybe the players on the other team. But my guys aren't getting paid, and I'm not getting paid. But you're getting paid, and because you're getting paid, you better do your job. You know. So yeah, sometimes we did play against players who were getting paid. That's for sure. I saw it.
That's awesome.
I know it happens.
That's awesome. Jordan, I'm curious if you have any memorable situations or stories from your playing days with your dad being on the coaching staff. Anything kind of first story that comes to mind, whether it be something that he did or that he said, or maybe something that was unsaid but you both understood because of your guys' relationship. I'm curious about your view on having your dad be part of your collegiate playing experience.
Um I could always hear him say the word shoot it. I still hear that to this day, even if he's not in the room. Um, and that was never because he was, being like a selfish parent or anything. It was always coming from like it actually would be a good shot. Um, I think one that sticks out, and it's a really like cool memory, is we did win our second conference championship his first year as an assistant. And so that was a really cool moment to share together to win a championship at the college level with your dad on the staff and cutting down the nets. I think that was really cool. Um, I have a unique experience, I think, as a collegiate athlete. So I lived at home while I was playing and while I was going to school because it's here in Eugene, it's where I'm from, and so I lived at home. So I actually lived where my dad lived throughout my college career while he was coaching everything. So um, being able to have late night conversations at the house over like a meal that he cooked up or something, like about the game, whether I played a lot, whether I played good, whether whatever the situation may have been, to just talk about it was really cool. And I would venture to guess I'm one of very few college athletes in the whole world in the history of college basketball that has experienced something like that. Um, and so that actually helped me a lot um, as far as learning about the game from the perspective of being a coach. Um, I appreciated those moments way more for like the coaching aspect because what I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so I was actually like learning. Yes, I would review game film as a player and what could I do better as a player, but I had started to learn now like what can I see as a coach? Like if I was the coach of the game, that happened tonight. Um, so that was really cool. I think that I have just like an experience that hardly anyone I don't know anyone that's ever experienced that, living at home with a parent who's on your coaching staff in college. Um, so, yeah, just, moments here and there. Like he mentioned earlier, he didn't coach me a lot like at practice in college. We would have those conversations outside of practice. I already knew what the expectation was from him. and what his opinions were. I grew up my whole life playing for him. So yeah, I didn't really ask questions. I spent a lot of time as a player. You know, you asked my dad earlier, like, how did he view those relationships with players and with me on the team? I picked the brain of Coach Litz all the time. That was kind of my go-to coach um, at practice, asking him and all of his knowledge of the game, and what his experiences were. And I had built that relationship with Coach Litz prior to my dad joining the staff because Coach Litz was there when I got there. So, yeah, I don't know, just like a multitude of things. I just think the moments that we shared as father and son, as player and coach, I think was just special and something that I would never trade. And I didn't ask for him to be on the staff. I had no idea that he called Luke after he talked with Tubby Smith. I was told at the same time basically that the team was told. So like that's what we're kind of talking about when we had separate relationships as being a player coach and father son. So it's really cool, and I think that we have like a special bond because of it. Um, Something that no one else really has. So yeah.
That's cool. Here, Eddie,
Yeah.
I have a question. This is something that I wonder about for my future, about coaching your kid, and and you guys have both kind of alluded to it a few times, is like the primary thing that would help the most is having separate relationships with your son or your daughter in that experience, because you talked about having your hey, as a coach, when Jordan talked back to you, like, hey, wrong place, wrong time, wrong method, but separately as a father, I'm proud of you in that moment. Is that kind of what because I know lots of people individually that have had really sour relationships with their parents because of the blending of both coaching and parenting, and
Right.
they're not being a separator there. Is that really what has kind of led to your guys's? I mean, you guys work together currently, and like the thought of working with my dad side by side, love the guy, and it's not like same type of situation, but that's a lot of my dad. So clearly you guys have done something right to not hate each other's guts at this point. Is that what it comes down to?
I mean, not hating each other's guts. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's an
Oh.
important thing. But I think I give Jordan a lot of credit for this because he's got the kind of personality that can handle it. Um, I think one of the things that I try to do, I think, is I've never been afraid to admit when I'm wrong. And I think a lot of dads have a hard time admitting when they're wrong to their kids. Um, I just think that's a hard thing because as a parent, you want to be right. Um, so there's times to where I'm not right. I think my relationship with Jordan, a lot of it had to do with the strength of his personality and his quiet nature. Obviously, my relationship with my daughter is different. I used to coach my daughter when she was a kid, and I basically give my assistant coach. I told him he needed to coach my daughter, and I'll take care of all the other girls, because uh, that was a little bit different. She was a little more stubborn in that regard. I mean, Brooklyn's an amazing person, and wouldn't trade her for the world. Um, but she had a different personality, and I was a little headstrong as a dad, and I'm headstrong as a coach, and she's got my personality when it comes to her being headstrong, and so that didn't always mesh well, right? Jordan doesn't have didn't have that personality as growing up. I mean, he allowed himself to be coached. So first of all, it's not going to be. No parent can make it happen. It's a unique situation. We know it's a unique situation. I'm not saying it can't be duplicated, but my personality and Jordan's personality is a great mix for this, and not every father son's going to have that relationship. So, um, but you as the parent have to be willing to be the one that's flexible, because your kid's personality, they're not mature enough to know how to change it. They're not mature enough to know how to um, separate the relationship. You as the parent have to be the one that's willing to do that. You as the parent has to be the one that's willing to have those conversations and admit when you're wrong, especially as a coach, and if I'm wrong, we'll talk about it later, because we're not going to talk about it in front of other people. And then you got to be willing to talk about it. And so I think just being open and honest, yet having really strong boundaries. You know, my wife is amazing in helping me develop those boundaries. She was really good at, now is not a good time to have that conversation. You know, you probably need to have that conversation when you've calmed down a little bit more and Jordan's in the right frame of mind, and he's had some time to get over the loss or get over the whatever it was. And so I have an amazing wife who's supernatural when it comes to understanding relationships, in my opinion. And so I give her a lot of credit for that. I mean, it's not that it can't be duplicated. I'm just saying that it's hard for a lot of parents to be able to separate that, because honestly, I wanted Jordan's success really bad, just like every parent does want their kid's success. But Jordan had a work ethic, and so that made it easy to want the success, because he was really good. And I didn't get to coach him and him be the best player on the team because I was the coach. He was the best player on the team whether I was the coach or not. And that's hard for other kids and other parents to deal with. And if those parents are listening to this podcast, they still might not like that, right? Even though their kids are gone and married and out of the house and everything like that too, they still might not like to hear it. But at the time, Jordan was the best player. And but that's why I was the hardest on him too, because I coached some other kids that were amazing, great basketball players, went on and played college basketball too. So it helped them also. And I had no problem giving the ball to the other kid when he was playing way better than Jordan. So it wasn't all about Jordan shooting the basketball, that's for sure. But, when you make 8 or 9 threes a game multiple times, you kind of get a green light, and that's what he did all the time in AAU ball is hit a lot of threes. And when you're that good of a shooter, you're kind of going to get a green light. And your kid's missed the last 10 in a row, so he's probably not going to get the green light. It's just the way it goes. That relationship's hard. I can understand how, your dad's on a coaching staff, right, Josh?
What's that?
Your dad's on a coaching staff.
Caitlin's dad. Caitlin's dad.
Oh, I'm sorry. So
in-law.
Yeah. His father-in-law.
Father-in-law is on a coaching staff, but it's kind of that. It's kind of that situation to where as a parent, you can't allow your passions and your wants and desires to override your own kid's level of talent and their own passion and desire. If Jordan fell in love with baseball, I probably would be coaching college baseball. It just might have happened that way. A lot of my coaching and what I was developed my passions into was around, what my kids' success were into and what they wanted to do. Although I'd always be a basketball coach, probably. I was a basketball coach before Jordan was born. So, I loved coaching basketball. That was always there, and maybe that's why he became a basketball player too. Let's admit it, I probably guided and directed him in that path anyway, so it's probably my fault, because you wouldn't usually do that to your 5'11", son, make basketball his favorite sport, right? Because he doesn't have the extra 6 inches he could use.
I am named after Michael Jordan, so
right.
Yeah,
I kind of, yeah.
I was curious if Wendy had any say in that, or if that was a big stamp for you.
According to her, she had no say in that. Now, I don't know if I remember her having no say in it, but according to her, she had no say in it.
Well, we'll get her on the podcast and then we'll ask her.
Fun? Just kidding.
That's good. Sweet. Awesome. That was a great conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Love getting to dive into this stuff with you. I'm sure we'll have you on again. Get to follow up and maybe a little in season. Follow along with the Bushnell team and see how things are going. And I really appreciate your time.
We should win some games this year, Josh. We should be winning some games and making you proud as a former player. So hopefully
Definitely.
that works out.
Definitely, for sure. Yeah, well, I'll definitely be tuned in.
Okay.